Hi students, we continue with our first day of week 2 on punctuation, and this time we're looking on the web page from the Purdue Online Writing Lab on the brief overview of punctuation. So because we're reading from a website this time, and this one's a bit more serious and more information for us to read from, I'm going to use a resource as well. I'm going to actually write notes on it. So again, using the Cornell note system, I'm going to have a summary, a cue, and the detailed section like this. So the first part is the cues, and then I have the details, and then I'm going to have my summary here. So what we'll be doing is reading this web page, which has information and examples on the different types of punctuation we have for academic writing, and using the Cornell note system, we're going to write some notes based on what we read for practice. So let's go back to the beginning. Here we have a summary of the overview, and this one is talking about why we have punctuation in our writing. So sometimes we pause or change the tone when we want to emphasize something. And the same thing in writing, we use punctuation to make these emphases as well. And using the right kind of punctuation would help you make the right kind of emphasis. So there are two parts of a sentence that we need to consider when we use punctuation. And the first one is the independent clause, the part of a sentence that has a subject and a verb and works as a complete sentence. It can stand alone. I am hungry, or I eat. Here these sentences have both the subject and the verb. At least the subject and the verb as an independent clause. The next part is the dependent clause. So that's when a part of a sentence has a subject and a verb but cannot stand alone. It is an incomplete sentence. So for example, when I am hungry, or when I eat. These are incomplete because even though it has a subject and a verb as a clause, I have a preposition in front of it, so it's missing. It needs more information. For example, I might do something like this. When I am hungry, I eat. Or I can write, I eat when I'm hungry. Like that, see? So, two key parts in a sentence: an independent clause and a dependent clause. So in my notes, I might need to write, things like, we use punctuation to show emphasis in writing. Another detail might be, there are independent clauses and dependent clauses. And you might write about what each type of clause is. Independent clause is a phrase with a subject and verb that can standalone as a complete sentence. A dependent clause is a phrase, gonna save time, that cannot stand alone as a complete sentence. So already you see, using this system, we are writing notes on what we're reading, and this time we're using the notes to really try and understand for ourselves what the rules for using punctuation in sentences are. And we're starting with dependent clauses and independent clauses. This talks about why we use punctuation. Okay, sometimes you take notes and you wonder what it is and you come back later, which is why we stop and think about it and use the Q section for summarizing and organizing your notes afterwards. So let's keep going. Now we have different types of punctuations. So first we have the comma. So that's one. And then we scroll down. Lots of rules for comma here. And then we have the next one. A semicolon, and then also a colon. Now we already talked about commas and semicolons a lot, so this set of notes will be good review for you, but there are more punctuations that we can use. So colon is one of them, and then we have more. We have parentheses, which are brackets like this, and we have dash, which is this, so you can see these dashes here. And then we have more, two more in this web page. We have quotation marks, which are these open and end quotes. You can see these right here. So more things in quotations, and then italics, which are words slanted like this, and we use these for a particular reason as well. So what are the different parts again? So here I'm going to use my notes to make sure I have all the punctuations that are covered in this web page. So the first one we have different punctuations and rules include. So okay, got comma. I'm going to leave some space for each one. Semicolon. The colon. I think the next one is parentheses. Let's see if I'm right. Comma. Semicolon. Colon. Good. Parentheses and then dash. Or the hyphen. And then there's more. Quotation marks and italics. Quotation marks and italics. Okay. Just before we continue, notice that we have a long web page here. If we're to memorize and write notes for all the rules, you might find that one page is not enough. Just like if you were trying to read and memorize this without any writing, it's going to take you at least an hour if you really want to know what each one is for. So I might recommend having these as separate pages, because we covered each one in separate lectures. Colon could be by itself, then parentheses and dash could be together, and then quotation marks and italics could be together. So you might have 1 page, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this can be its own page right here, you see? So that could be another page. So a good way to check is maybe compare how much you see on the web page. For example, this is already bigger than a page. It's almost like 2 pages. So that's definitely its own set of Cornell notes. And then semicolon looks like a page long, so you can use it as a separate page. Colon is pretty long too, so keep that as a separate page. For example, see, this is one rule, this is another rule, this is another rule, this is another rule. Use a semicolon after an independent clause when it's followed by a list, a quotation, and a positive, and other ideas directly related to the independent clause. Use a semicolon at the end of a business letter greeting. Use a semicolon to separate the hours and minutes in time notation. Use a colon to separate the chapter and verse in a biblical reference. So that's 1 rule, 2 rules, 3 rules, 4 rules. Some of these you may use for your academic writing. Some of these you may not. For example, you may or may not read the Bible. Probably not use it for this assignment or in your course. So that's probably maybe one you won't use. However, this is probably an important rule that you may use in a list, you see. You may not use this one as often, you may not use the business meeting or the hours and minutes, so but definitely rule 1 is good to write down the rule for and try a few practices yourself. So parentheses and dash could be another page, and then quotation marks and italics could be the last page. So what I'm going to do for these is to show you an example of what it would be like to try one of them, and then you can use your own Cornell notes to make sure you write notes for all the rules and practice yourself. So this is how it might work with the first one. Let's try commas. Make it a little bigger. So here we're starting with commas, and so the first rule is use a comma to join 2 independent clauses. So that's why we needed to know what this word means with a coordinating conjunction. So we have examples right here. This is a very important rule that's listed first. So again, with these sentences, we can see that this is one clause that's independent, and this one is independent, the second clause, and here we have the coordinating conjunction. See the but right there, and then the comma. So what we can do with this is maybe try writing your own sentence. You can use the same structure. Maybe I'll just change some words here and there. Maybe I'd say road construction is very expensive. So I tried my own sentence. I kept the same topic, road construction, and I used is not convenient. I tried to paraphrase a little bit, but I changed it. I used and instead. It is very expensive. So I tried using a comma and a coordinating conjunction. This time I used and because this is a different coordinating conjunction, I need to change the meaning of the sentence a little bit. Okay, so you can try it on your own with this one as well. So if I were to just take notes on this sentence, I'd need to write something like this in my notes. Rule 1. Use a comma and a coordinating conjunction. So I may not remember all of these, so I might write it down. And, or, but, nor, for. Did I miss any? So, to connect to independent clauses. So there are more rules than this, and if you're using more pages, for example, if this were just one page of Cornell notes, then you can write more rules. Rule 2, Rule 3, etc. Which is why this is another illustration. You shouldn't try to write everything on one page. When you read a web page or any article and you know it's long, it may be very wise to look at the headings and break down your notes in different headings. So if I were to count the rules for commas, for example, on this page, there's probably going to be a lot. So I'm going to make this smaller. See if I can fit all the commas in there. Wow, look at that. It's so small you might not even be able to read it, but I'll list the rules for you. Here's one rule, here's another rule, here's another rule, and another one. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So the first one had to do with independent clauses. The second one had to do with an introductory phrase. And right now you're kind of just taking my word for it because the text is really, really small. But I want you to see for yourself. Take the time to count the rules, and here we got 11, and this is for commas alone, which is why, yeah, you definitely want to use more space here, more space for your notes. And this one, you can practice. And let's make it bigger. And just like how we practice with a sentence like this, you can practice with every sentence here. I think that's what we can use the space for, you see. Let's try this one. To get a good grade, comma, you must complete all your assignments. So like to pass this course, I must do all my homework. So I have my introductory phrase right here, and I have my independent clause. So the introductory phrase is a dependent clause because I cannot have this as its own sentence. It's a prepositional phrase, I can't do that. So again, with this website, it's got space underneath each example sentence that you can try writing your own. You can practice your paraphrase skill this way, as well as using the right rules for each one. So that's it for this website. I'm going to end it there. Before I do, I'm going to finish my notes. So the cues for my details right now, I have why use punctuation. Maybe that's my cue to help me remember. My other cue is types of clauses, and I have 2 of those. Dependent and independent. and then I have different punctuations and their rules. Okay, so that's my short set of cues to help me remember the details if I were to look at them later on. But yours is probably going to look a lot more detailed because you'll be covering all the different rules. And my summary of this would be this page of notes is for, I might say, covers the reason for using punctuations and how to use them in writing sentences. So there you go. I got my details, my cues, and my summary for the notes. So when I review this lecture or this set of rules for punctuation using the notes, I can have a quick idea of what the notes are about. I can use cues to remember the details and then think about and practice the different punctuations and rules from comma all the way to italics. So that's it for this demonstration. If you have any questions, you can always post on Canvas or email me. Wish you the best of luck in your practices and this coming week as well as we prepare for writing an essay. Bye.